Wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Universal Current Show, episode 3. Today is Sunday, October 23rd, and we are alive and jubilant and ready to deliver to you everything that you're going to need to benefit the most off of the universal current that is coming across our planet right now. I wanted to first let everyone know that if you would like to tune in to this and you would like to see the pictures and the videos that are being described, you can tune in to our live stream channel, which is available at www.livestream.com/understanding, and Mr. Spirit Matter will be there as that hyper DJ taking you on this virtual tour through the knowledge that we're bringing forth today. Now, today is quite a day. Of course, yesterday was my birthday, and I did put a post together. In fact, I spent my whole birthday yesterday putting this post together, but I felt so invigorated by the information and delivering that information. I want to make sure we pay it forward, as I call it, or as many people call it, and actually use that day that is special to me to make it special for you. And what really came out was a lot of the stuff that I've been leading up to saying. And there's just, at points, there's a demarcation in when certain knowledge comes forth and when it shouldn't. And the most interesting part is that I've been watching knowledge like this for the last 2 or 3 years, that even though I may be aware of certain things, that for some reason I just haven't been able to translate that information to everyone. And then it'll come up out of nowhere, even sometimes when I don't choose to actually put my topic in that area. And so what this has pretty much become is our complete growth into wholeness. Of course, if someone says wholeness and is about that, that is still something that has to be achieved. And if you look at the resistance, what the resistance actually is the real-time progress of our spiritual growth as a group. Us beginning together in somewhat of a common state of mind, having the same desires of what we're seeking. And it's important to realize that everyone that really is on this phone because they're looking for something. If they have found it already, then there's no need to be on the phone. It's because we're always looking to expand, and we always will be. But expanding means changing. It doesn't mean staying the same. Growing means changing. It doesn't mean staying the same. So oftentimes when you're with one message, let's say reptilians like David Icke, then you'll have a whole group of people who are also into that message. But if David Icke chooses for any moment not to talk about reptilians anymore, or to solve the whole reptilian mystery, then all the people that are there for that would leave. The ones that will remain would be there for what he would be talking about next. And out of respect, you would understand that many of the people who brought major revelations to a lot of the knowledge should be already prepared to continuously move forward using that same analytical intuition, the same abilities that were utilized to discover that, to put time and attention into now revealing something else. So what the resistance is really about is not just staying on one topic or staying stuck on something, but solving. And this becomes very similar. When you say solve, you're talking about something very similar to the wand of Hermes, or what they call the Caduceus staff, which was the mythological staff of when you touch someone that had an infirmity with it, it would cure them. But of course, the symbolism of that staff has been almost lost by humanity in its true meaning in our struggle to find out what was written on many of the temple pyramid walls. Much of the knowledge that has been lost and has not been able to be interpreted. I will tell everyone now that the knowledge has already really been interpreted, and the real interpretation has just been hidden. And so that's really the tune of today's show, is to understand that we have to get a little bit in depth about who exactly has been manipulating and changing the information in order to make us confused, and what that has caused. Because the thing about the resistance is also neo-universalism. We want to show the commonality between all organic life, not just religions, which is the term of universalism, is to just show the common denominator of most religions, which we are already aware of. But that still does not keep them from fighting. So what we have discovered more than anything with what I'm going to bring forth today is it was already known a long time ago. Man and woman, if you want to look at the term God or Yod or fire or spirits, man and woman are God. They are spirits. They are not the bodies. And what happens is that when you know what the core principles to that is, the core principles of your spirit, then it's very easy for you to tap into high levels of energy. But when you lose identity with your spirit or your soul or your son, as it is called in the English, when you lose identity with that, then your energy starts to become drained and your vision gets cloudy and things become very dismal. And this is what we discovered was taking place with the language, but not so much as even the language, but with our society. That as we watch it continue, it doesn't seem to be gaining more focus. In fact, it looks like it's going into a blind fury. So what we have here on today's show is about avoiding that. Not only avoiding that for yourself, but also teaching others properly how to avoid that within the same laws and rules that they have been using, however they've been misinterpreted. So how this is really going to begin. Let me look over just a brief set of notes here so I understand exactly where to begin. There's actually a post that's called Planetary Resistance Founder Turns Age 33 and also reveals hidden secrets about the Innerverse. And this link to this post I've posted into the chat box, which is available on the Blog Talk Radio chat box. And so I just put that in there now. And most people that are probably on this line are familiar with that post, but everyone should have got it in their email box. But that post is very expansive and it talks about a lot of things. And of course it's now very important for us to clarify what is being expressed here in this post. Because according to some of the things that we've said in the past and some of the stuff that's mentioned here, some stuff is a little bit contradictory. But again, we have been looking for the synchronicity and the likeness in knowledge through what we call a fractal. Meaning that if it's really the truth, you will find it in different levels of the reality. But when you find that, there becomes no reason for you to continue to deny it. If you continue to deny it, then it becomes somewhat of a state of madness. Meaning that you found the truth, and for some reason, whether it's someone else doing it to you, or something that you're currently believing in that needs to change, if there's some reason that you're still stuck on that, then it means that you're stuck at one point in the path. Meaning that if you're on the path to becoming everything, to understand that you are everything, but at some point you become limited to who you think you are, whether it's reptilian, whether it's God, whether it's whoever, then you've met somewhat of a block on your path, and it's necessary that you now move it. And this is what I talk about in the post about one of the most important things about things that demand us to observe them for a moment, because there's something to learn. They put themselves in front of us, and it seems to be no way of getting to the next level without going through them. And this, I mean the pentagram. With the pentagram being thrown all in humanity's face all the time, whether it's on a flag of many of the different countries to some of the popular designs from McDonald's and toy stores and you name it, even templates to Word, Microsoft Word and different things of that nature, all contain certain symbols that humanity is very unfamiliar with. And it's clear that they're unfamiliar with them because now they've gotten to a point where they want to fear them. This becomes the actual systematic shutdown of our reality if we begin to allow fear to control everything. So it's important for us to come to the full realization that fear is negative. But negative means non-existent. It's simply a placeholder. It's something that we created in order for us to make contrasts. It's just a tool. So if every time a tool out of the great mystical toolbox comes out, like negative, we can't seem to learn the lesson from it, or we get hurt by the tool even, then how far do you really think that we can progress as universal beings? or beings that are attempting to understand their universal nature. Because many here from Earth feel like they are just earthlings. But the reality is you have multiple planetary energies showing up here. Now remember, a planet is something alien, it's something foreign. Until you understand it, it remains as that. So what we had done at times in history was anytime there was a foreign state of consciousness or another culture, we designated it as one particular unit, i.e. a planet. So when you talk about a planet like Saturn or a Saturnalian culture, you have to ask, where does this come from? Does it come from that planet with a ring around it? Or does it come from our own state of consciousness? This becomes a very important thing to understand, because then if you get this answer right, you cease the ideas that there's extraterrestrials and that there's something outside of you or extra. It's inside. And I'll show you how. When the cowboys entered into Texas, the Lone Star State, and bought the culture of wearing a brimmed hat, very similar to the Jewish and Judaistic practice of wearing a brim hat, and began to rustle cattle and use guns or lead, which is the same metal as Saturn, then was introduced into the Western culture the Saturnalian concept. When we live in a reality where a large group of people begin to act a certain way, like let's say Jupiterian or Jovian, then there gets invented by us, at that point gets invented by us another planet or another system or another culture. And so what happens in our world is that if some cultures are suppressed and some are brought forth, and it becomes a great confusion about what the lessons are, and someone wants to make their way of living the only way that everyone can live. When you have lived in a reality that has already taken place, it becomes no wonder that we don't know where God or the Most High is. Because we don't know where we are. And we are God. We are the Most High. It's very clear at explaining that in the spiritual books. But as the tainting goes on to the book, you start seeing heavy levels of contradictions, such as, we all are God, as the Bible proclaims, but it says ye are to fear God. Now, how does this work? If you're God, but you fear God, does that not mean that you fear yourself? So it becomes not hard to understand in our reality why so many people are in fear of exploring themselves, which is really where they'll find all of these mysteries, these adventures, these contacts, etc. So from that point, I can begin this post here as we see that I talk about very briefly. I'm just going to go through this in pictures. But the second picture, you will see the polarities of the human body. And we're going to take this one step further because it has man and woman separated, but we already know man and woman are still in the same body. It just appears, because we're looking out at through two eyes, so we see everything dual. It appears that there is an opposite sex called female. But the reality is that within a man and a woman's body, there's a masculine and a feminine side. Now, since you have a masculine and a feminine, you have this term too. So there's somewhat of a dualistic nature within the person's mind anyway. Within their body, there's a dualistic nature between a masculine and feminine principle, or a water and a fire, coming into conflict with each other. However, this creates also the power that drives the body, if you didn't know. But there also is a mediator created, and this is why our planet got termed the third planet, because there is a large part of a triangle or a third component that we incorporate into our existence. We can dub this particular being an ego, but the correct term really becomes eidolon. Of course, the term ego is already demonized, pretty much. Everyone thinks the ego, you got to get rid of the ego. That is true. However, to get rid of the ego, because it's almost like saying, let's get rid of the drug lord that's next door. The ego has already set up shop and acts as a mediator between the positive and the negative side of our bodies. And it's because of that, there is relationships and interactions that are caused by the decisions made ultimately by the ego. Once it hears what the masculine side has to say, and then the feminine side has to say, then it makes its decision of what it should do next. Now, if you're living in a reality that pushes more of a right hand or masculine side of things, then you can see why the reality becomes very destructive as the person's mind becomes very destructive. Only because it's not being kept in balance. So we'll clear this up a little bit more about this masculine and this feminine side of our bodies by looking first into the higher levels of knowledge and what it teaches about this. As it says in one of Michael Jackson's songs, ABC is easy as 1, 2, 3. Basically, that there's some type of knowledge that the higher beings are aware of that makes it as simple as that. And that knowledge is 1, 2, and 3, and how those tools can be applied to many things in order to discover what is going on. It's like a grid that you lay over something to understand its complete place. It's a tool. So it's important that you understand that it must be applied to every situation as that situation is occurring. And I will explain to you the 1, 2, 3 of life. First of all, when we talk about the zero for just a quick moment, the zero is not supposed to be discussed. And the reason is the zero means no thing. It means everything that has not been identified. Thus, when you identify it, it ceases to become a zero. So it's important that the zero is looked at as a mystery. It is the actual womb of creation which brings out things. To go inside of it, few have gone in and been able to come back out because they say there's that much of a mystery going on there. So we'll just talk about one because that applies more to our reality, wholeness. So what ends up happening is that the first generation or one which came out of the zero. It looks simply like a straight line coming out of a hole. The hole itself is the womb, and here comes number one. Now, number one is original. Number one is perfect because all that comes out of zero is perfection. So how this works is that in order for us to get into what we are experiencing now as individual beings and all these different integers, we had to leave from one. Because one is the state of it's not male and it's not female. Ideas like male and female haven't even began yet. There's no separation. There's no ideas of separation. If one was to create another one of itself, it would just merge into the one again because it's no different. So that's why two came about. And the highest knowledge that can really be available here on this planet to jump off all of your other sets of knowledge comes from the number two. Because the number two is actually where our interaction is taking place and coming from. Two is like our ancestor. Because now we're three. So let's talk a little bit about two, our ancestor, and its traits. Now, when you say two, if you write that in the indigenous way, you write it as two sticks. Indicating that it's two separate things. And we can immediately label those male and female. So who two actually is two beings, but sharing the same space. And now we get into, like I said, the idea of the progress of man. Because man has and woman have a previous stage that they call they were gods. And this is why the gods maintain such a dualistic state, even up until this point, that the gods have somewhat of a two-face or Janus nature to them. And these two faces are male and female. And this allows them to procreate. So, What's important to understand, though, about male and female, once you begin to do this, remember, two is not one, so it's not collected. It's actually agreed to separate. It's agreed to be in a dualistic standpoint for the idea of creation to come about. So what the conversations between two, from one side to the other, is, I like it hot. The other one says, I like it cold. The other one says, I like to be seen. The other one says, I like to be invisible. The other one says, I like a lot of energy. The other says, I don't like any energy. So the reality of two's personality is actually hidden within the symbol of our moon. Who is number two? Let's identify who number two is. Number two is the moon. This is why the moon was always looked at as an androgynon. It was never female, just female, and it was never just male. In fact, its first indication or name was Nanar Sin. The being who was the consort was Inanna. So all of the ancients were simply trying to establish for everyone is that there was a masculine and a feminine side of the moon. And this is why they show the horn gods with the horns, because they're the bulls. They're the ones putting forth the seed. And then you have the female side of the moon, which is the one putting forth the milk. So the reality became that all of the knowledge from indigenous time was already encapsulated within their language. As you'll see, their symbol for the letter A is the bull with horns, if you have your charts there. You'll see the bull with horns is the letter A, because they're saying, well, this is where things begin. It began from two. Two end up birthing us. They are more like cows and bulls. The mother has milk, and the father gives the seed or sperm, but has a very bad attitude at times. And so what happens is, if you look at how that plays out in our reality, we see that, yes, women do contain the mammary glands, and they do suckle the child. And that was the only way it was done in the old days. There was no Similac with iron. If anything, there was a wet nurse or another mother to give the child milk. So if the mother could not produce milk for whatever reason. So what we find is that the ancients already knew about the knowledge of where we actually came from, but they also understood the dualistic nature of the moon and how there was a great desire to move beyond duality. What happened is the moon became encased in words like Hermes, which indicates her, which is a female. Mes means sun, so a female sun. So a male and a female. So this is why when the mysteries started to be misinterpreted by the current regime, mainly the Theosophical societies, that many of the society's members started to become homosexual or lesbian, in attempting to fulfill the rites of the moon when they misunderstood the principles altogether. So if you want to ask, well, why is there such a homosexual component within Masonry and within Illuminati? It's because the moon has a masculine side and a feminine side. It is androgynous. And because many of them are still on the first level, which is under the angel Gabriel or Jabril, who is then its counterpart known as Phul, which is Phul, because they're still there, the most that they can actually do is attempt to become androgynous in the distorted way in which they're stuck in, because they stole the knowledge and they think that they're going to be able to get something out of it. And their idea is to act it out externally, rather than understanding what it means to be male and female inside, and then to actually bring those two energies into balance, and then to circulate that energy through your body, and that allows you to fully activate into a higher state of consciousness. Not acting it out externally in a ritual in which everything has been zoomorphied and you have all of the animals and all the things and bones and all this stuff within the ritual. It does not happen that way. The reason why these organizations and factions have been built is to still show humanity that if they're looking for God or the Most High, whatever term you want to use, it's inside. And as long as you keep looking for it outside, you will never find it. That's what they are built for. They are the negative contrast. Just as people always complain daily about many of the rappers and many of the artists and different individuals. However, they are being paid by this society. If you want to complain to anyone, you complain about the masses that are paying them with their energy, because thus they're employed to do their job as they're supposed to. Negative's job is to work for positive. Because we are positive, that makes us move. It makes us animated. We can choose to pay our energy to negativity or something that really does not exist. And how you know individuals like Jay-Z do not really exist is if you choose never to listen to him. Thus, he does not exist for you. So this is the power and the ability that we've always had as sentient beings, is to choose what we want to tune into and what we don't want to tune into. And that actually gets us to the real term of wholeness, and then those outside of wholeness. We take it a step further. People have to understand what wholeness really means. It means you have joined a collective group of individuals in a progressive state of mind. Wholeness. The ones who are outside of wholeness are actually the ones still in the conflict and the blind way of non-negation, etc. So this means that, of course, the ones in wholeness would still be abrasive to the ones that are not in wholeness if we ever come down each other's path at a certain point. Because wholeness is going to stay together while the other side will attempt to try to tear it apart. So it's important to understand, because we're in realization of all this does not make us not whole. Like, people think that because we get into conflict that we're not whole anymore. That's not what whole means. There's still the people that are outside of being whole that need to either be instructed or showed or given a lesson, etc. And so how this knowledge really begins to move along and begin to work through us is that the more we get truth, because truth, it stops conflicts. Either the person doesn't want to accept it and then they just remain there and wholeness keeps moving, or the person has the opportunity to actually join and can keep collective with wholeness on our progress to actually discover everything through facts. So that's why I say in the next picture, 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, I cracked the 2012 code and pulled it apart as the word Zion. So thus I already knew where the reality was attempting to head. Because I had already been following Judaistic, Zionistic, New Jerusalem lore, Kabbalistic laws, etc., because that was the continuation of the religion of Christianity. Like, most people are still stuck at Christianity. However, if they kept going, they would have found Gnosticism, and depending upon where they chose to go next, they would have went into Judaism, and then started to understand the letters, the names, the letters and the names, etc., and the numbers, because those are what open up the worlds, because you already have access to what I call being a level 5 dreamer, which we talk about in this post, which is you have the ability to be fully conscious while you're asleep. And then the utterance of certain words creates other realities or gives you access to certain realities or creates doors, etc. So if you want to understand what the people that are able to accomplish this are doing with the knowledge, then you understand it's that. But one thing you need to understand is that many of the people who are saying that they are doing that are not. They're locked out, just like anyone else who does not set their mind, body, and soul right to begin to receive it. So you have all of these people, such as some of the Orthodox Jews, many of the people within the Christianity, etc., saying they have the power, but they have nothing. And you can understand the actual wealth of what they've accumulated or how much it works for them, because how many adepts have been produced from Christianity. Let's not just look at the religion, judge the religion, etc. Let's back off of it, get on the kether, which is the high state or high point, and look down on it and say, how many equipped disciples walk out of those temples? None, almost. Very, very few. So that means just in general, from that level, that spiritual system has flaws and is defunct, because it should have 80 to 90% success with how much money and how much knowledge it supposedly has, but it doesn't have it. It doesn't have it not because the knowledge and the ability is not there, but it is because the people who are attempting to use it are not right. It won't even work for them. And I'll show you how this works. Now, in here you saw that this word, down further in the post, you see that this word Yah, which they've mapped out as the human genome. Like, this is the actual diagram that they send to us as the human genome. So from that point, the reason why they never enlightened everyone else about what the human genome said is because the human genome said that we actually were not humans. We're spirits. It says that we are actually fires. In the essence that how we understand fire is that it's everywhere. You light something and then it appears. So the reality becomes is that the reason why much of the knowledge never got to us, because it was going to make us fully understand who we are, and that was going to take us into a higher state of consciousness that had nothing to do with being in a Tron-based world. We may still remain in the organic reality, but it's entirely different than what we're actually looking at now in this fallen state, since they've introduced more than anything the fallen state to everyone. The beginning of these religions begin that man is in sin and fallen. However, the baby that comes out of the mother's womb is not fallen. It is what is taught to the baby once the baby comes out that makes them fall or fail. So this is what I started to notice. If anyone had access to as much as I have access to, they would have come to the same conclusions. That you saw men that were already diabolical and evil go into collecting the ancient knowledge and then disseminating it to people after they reinterpreted it. So because what was being discussed is simply the knowledge of the Spirit and God, once they made God, first of all, not us, and told everyone it was someone else, we began to fall then. Because the reality becomes is that when they were trying to interpret it, now who is they? The Aryans, the barbarians, many of the individuals who were attempting to steal, rape, and pillage, even Africans. In every single tribe there was a fractal of that kind of character. So when they actually got to the knowledge about God, guess what they saw? Themselves, because they are God. We all are. So we all are spirits. God just means spirit. Okay, so when they saw themselves, they wrote about themselves. Notice how the Bible is the annuals of these kings and these Caesars and just what they're doing. And just like now with many of the advanced people in this world, the advanced people are not writing about what they're doing and et cetera. They're most of the time just in action. So it was the same back then. The ones that were practicing a higher level of spirituality didn't have time to go to these meetings and councils with the Romans and tell them what they need to be writing. That was not how it worked. So when they put this stuff together, the same people who have been destroying reality put this together in front of everyone and said, this is what God's about. And then they use the same symbols and words and letters and numbers, etc., so that it will resonate with the people. Then now, here we are thousands of years later, and now they're telling us it's extraterrestrial. They're telling us it's extraterrestrial and that our parents are way out there because they're actually attempting to push it further away from our reach. It's not just external to us, like right next to you on the counter. It's now in space when it's supposed to be inside. So notice the trick. That's why I said, not on a racial status, but the melanin dominant people were the ones that actually brought forth all of these cultures, diagrams, geometry, etc. And then it was passed down from there continuously until our whole worlds continue to change, our color, skin continue to change, etc. But where it came from is still one place. But it was here already. See, the power of understanding that is to know it was already here with your mother and father. No matter what color you are, they already had it. So it doesn't make you have to look into space for who your lineage is actually connected to. We're all connected. The more they keep telling you, oh, well, no, it's actually 7 root races. Well, where did those 7 come from? And no matter what, if the person says, well, they came from 3, then where did 3 come from? Well, it came from 1. Well, there we are. So there's no more to argue about here. So notice how all of the words that have been brought to us about power and about and who we are always have a dual component to them. So they say Adam, it began with Adam. What does Adam mean? Well, according to Kabbalah, Ad means father and Am means mother, except they're backwards. Now, you know Ad means father because that's where we get our word daddy. And Am means mother because that's where we get our word mama. So the reality becomes, why do they always show us in duality? Adam, he's mother and father, but then they say, but he's a man. You see? So this is when the knowledge has been reinterpreted. When it gets reinterpreted from ego. Because remember, the third component that most of these individuals that deface the knowledge were working with, the third component was their ego. So when they wrote down their stories, they wrote it in the aspect of Zeus or Deuce or the dual god. And then as they continue to bring forth the story, the only story they were really bringing is about man and woman and their involvements with this knowledge that had been given to us as we are struggling to find our position. But I tell you, many are finding it. I found it. And all I'm trying to do is just give it to people so that they can get on to their next stage of spiritual progress. I've already moved on. People have to understand, when you get into higher states of consciousness, you have the ability to actually run this 3D body on almost auto while you're into higher states of consciousness dimensions. And they say, well, how do you do that? You mean you're actually somewhere else? No, it's all in your physical vehicle. I don't have to go somewhere else. It's all in here. It's just in order. So now it's time for some house cleaning. So we'll go. I'm going again to the next picture here, which is it says you can lead a man to knowledge, but you can't make him think. And that's what really is about to happen here with the resistances. That, as always, the tree must be pruned. And so this never was about whether people agree with it or not. It's about truth. And so at any point a person comes into conflict with truth, this is not a democracy. A person can choose to go and share what they feel elsewhere because we're leading people to knowledge. We bought all of the information, the photos, the pictures, the books. You just have to put the time in. Now you have an extra component. You have someone that will actually put the time in because it's just very serious to me. I see what's going on in the world, and from a logical standpoint, I realize, hey, it's time to figure out what's up with the higher states of consciousness because that is the only solution. To me, every experience that I've ever had, every trial or tribulation that I've ever faced in this life has always been able to be solved spiritually with no problem. However, when I attempted to solve it in different ways, it did not work. Or it took a long time. So I tell you, why should we deviate from that? And that's why I was able to, after looking through so much knowledge, fully denying everything at first, cleaning off my slate. So I didn't feel like it was grandmother that was telling me that that's what I should be doing. It was my mother. It was my father. You should go to church, baby. It's none of that because I had to walk away from all of that. And I felt fully adamant about never coming back. So it wasn't just a healthy walk away. It was I'll never be back because I'm searching for the truth. And now we have found it. Now I see why these places have such are able to hold people in their fold, because they have a part of the truth. And even for just a part of the truth, a person will wait and wait and wait, as if they're playing lottery, even just for the idea of getting $10 million or the idea of going into a higher state of consciousness. They'll hang out. But unfortunately, they did not deliver. That is my quarrel with the church. They did not deliver. When a young man walks in or a young woman walks in seeking now to disconnect themselves from all negativity, what they find is a haystack of more people that are just on another program, but even more confused and more judgmental than the ones from the outside. But it doesn't stop at just the churches. It's in the mosque too. It's a weird feeling going on in there. You're afraid to accidentally miss a rak'ah or not do wudu properly or clean properly. Like you feel this ominous, someone wants to judge you all around you. So moving forward, we see the diagram of the two worlds. This is the highest knowledge that's going to be available, because this is what they want to keep secret. This is what they want to keep people out of, because as I said before, if you actually dreamed every single day high-level dreams, like you were just out there just doing all sorts of stuff, flying and all sorts of stuff, if you kept having those dreams every single day, what do you think you would change into in this reality? What do you think you would change into if you have positive dreams every night? So the reality becomes, because that world has another spatial, you can fly, it becomes more primary than this one. So what actually happens is that that's where the controllers attempt to exercise the most control. Which of course, through the food and different things that disturb our mind and make it radical so that it cannot pass in through this womb to the other side of the actual inner verse. So let's talk just a little bit and very briefly about this other world and what it's used for. Because by right, everything that you have experienced, as much as you can expand into yourself, you have access to your timeline. And because of that, you have the ability to go into that timeline and actually move certain things around that will change where you are here. It's just your right. It's universal right. So the only way to prevent people from moving around things and conquering fears and all that stuff, which would take place in the dream world anyway, they keep a person from understanding what is really going on with the other world. That's why I said before, it was so important for them not even to say there was one more world out there that had sentient life on it. Not even one. They didn't give us even one, even though they knew there were an uncountable number. They never even acknowledged that there was one of them, because they already had knowledge that, first of all, if they know that there's one of them, then they will attempt to access it right from the world in which they can access other worlds, and that is their dream state. This is what's happening, people. So in this dream state, it's more like, I guess the term would be parabola. It would be where you would actually be upside down, because we're actually on a globe in space, etc. Where you would actually go is into an opposite side of yourself that would be really ethereal, because you're actually a spirit. You're really not completely a mammal. So what happens is that in that world, that is the world that they often let you catch short glimpses of their part of it in movies like Day Watch, Night Watch. Short glimpses of their part of it when they take you outside of the Matrix in the movie The Matrix. Because those that are in the higher level of knowledge are aware of this other plane. Now, this other plane has a lot to do with how your mind is set up. So if your mind is garbage, then in that world, it's nothing but garbage. And so that is their problem, because their mind is all altered. They only have a weird world to go to. And so they definitely don't want everyone else to have access to their own worlds also, to understand that they can actually create another dimension in which they can spend as much time in there as they want, if they choose never to wake up in this reality. So that's why it says in the Bible, God says, the earth is my footstool. Okay, this is what they're talking about. The earth itself is based on the geometry of the cube now. On top of the earth, the dimension that I'm speaking of, which is more ethereal, operates on thoughts in ethereal forms, is on top of this one, just like air rises to the top. And so, in essence, all the beings that are up there or have access to that, they are standing on top of this one, this square, and this makes this square somewhat of a footstool for them. That's what that means. So, this is a very important thing that you see after the diagram of two worlds, which is the levels of the dreamer. It's important to go through that and see exactly what level you're on. And I left notes to if you're on a certain state, how to increase and get to the next state. While if you've ever been at the highest state and you've fallen from that, why that happened and how to get back. And then I end that with dreams solved. Like there's no more questions, and people should email me really no more questions about what their dream really means, etc. Because it will tell them what it means by the levels of a dreamer. Because in order to really, really get information from the dream, you need to be a level 4, level 5 dreamer. Other than that, everything else that's coming across could be manipulated by so many different integers. These worlds are ad infinite. And I'll actually explain very briefly that a lot of the symbolism that has been given to us in regards to the Vesica has a lot to do with the preliminary stage of mankind as a physical being. And this is the touchy subject that everyone runs from, and like David Icke made $1 million off of, and this is the reptilian topic. Now, if you notice, the reptilian eye is actually shaped like a vesica, while the mammal eye is actually shaped like a circle. However, because we're all connected, no matter who doesn't want to get a big hug or whatever, it still means that somewhere down in the chains, either we were reptilians or they were mammals, one of the two, however you want to accept it. So from that standpoint, it means that there is a direct connection, just like there's a direct connection between humans and dogs. There's a direct connection between humans and reptiles. Now, if you notice in the East, that connection never rubbed them the wrong way. The connection with the serpents never rubbed them the wrong way when you see it in pictures. They have somehow used the serpent as a symbolism for their instructors, and I'll show you why that happened later on. However, in the other hemisphere, the Western hemisphere, they were into birds. They demonized the serpent and said, hey, as the Aryans are always doing their separating, hey, we don't want to be around the snakes, except we want to make a bird snake, just to see how that's going to come out. So remember, the Aryan state of consciousness is often not grounded, people. If you want to really understand what happens to people who don't have roots, then watch the Aryans. And then when they get roots, they become the best people. So, and that's their lesson. Likewise, sometimes the melanin dominant is too aggressive and too rooted, too much energy, too much strength, non-focused. And they have a lesson to learn about where that actually gets if they cannot collect themselves and stay together. So there's all types of things going on as we are now collecting into time wave zero in this huge melting pot of humanity and being bundled next to each other to talk to each other so that we can see, hey, you're not so different after all. The reality becomes we understand then more of who we are when we are not able only to glimpse into each other, but to get the knowledge again of what's going on the spiritual plane. So, as you see, this shape of the eye, on the outside of our eye, still remains the shape of the Vesica. So, the reason why they show Jesus coming in and out of the Vesica, because Jesus, or I say Yahweh Shin, which is the correct terminology for the sun. And again, these are energies and emanations, not physical beings. So, and just ways to explain things on a higher level. So the sun, or the third component, but in this case the fifth, actually is attempting to gain the ability to actually go in and out of worlds. Meaning he has to die and then rise again. Die and then rise again. He has to gain the ability of being able to go into the other world, which means to be dead to this one. Because you can't bring ideas. Anyone who knows how to lucid sleep properly knows that when you start to think about what's going on in this world, all your lucid stuff starts to mess up and you start to wake up. So that's what it means to die to this world. Means you go into a state where you're no longer in this world, and then you pass through this womb, the same kind of thing you came out of, and then you're into this other one, the original. One of the more original worlds. As you see, there's a picture right below the diagram of the two worlds, and it looks like an eye. And it's ad infinitum, the Kabbalistic tree of life. But it's just, look at it visually. It's just eyeballs. Eyeballs are worlds. And that's all they say. The eyes are the gateway of the soul. They're telling it all there. They're gateways for souls. So what ends up happening here is that when you pass in and out of these eyes or wombs, then you actually go into other worlds, and you will want to go to the more perfected worlds. That's why it's important for you to understand how to maintain balance, because some people are actually passing into these worlds already, even naturally, not needing so much explanation like I'm giving now, but they're ending up in these strange, deranged worlds, and they're coming back with these messages like the world's going to be in, it's going to be over. No. The world you went to is going to be over. There's other ones that are infinite, and then there's this one, which is like a Midgard. Because remember, they call this place Midgard. It's like the place where the hobbits live. It's where it's right in between. It's a control point it's not a control point. That's what I meant to say. It's like a flotation. And that's why we have the ability to ease into one state of consciousness and ease into another. And this becomes our training, people. Our first lesson is fear. So that's why everything that we look at, the reptile and everyone, becomes like an enemy. Like I was saying, in the East, they don't have a problem with the reptile because it was actually presented to them in a certain kind of way. In the West, we don't have problems with birds because it was actually presented to us in a certain kind of way. And as a man that has deeper knowledge said to me, he said, what I see it as, it becomes. It's important for our people to understand when they get on a higher state of consciousness, if you run across something that looks different than you and you act different, like it's different, it starts to act different. Because it's only responding to your thoughts. Because it's all contained within you. So this is why the confusion has been going on this dimension, and few people have access to the other altered states, because in this dimension there's so many things going on that keeps a person locked out. Mainly what the actual laws and rules really mean. What the actual symbols actually interpret into. Not what distorted D-man or the divided man gave everyone, not the interpretation he gave everyone. Remember, how they looked at it, the controllers, civilizers, colonizers, etc., was these people like spiritual stuff. Let's give them a little piece of that stuff that they were using before, and then they'll be okay, but it will not be all of it, so they'll never accomplish whatever it is that it's talking about, which we don't know. But as long as we do know, as long as we divide it, they'll never have all of it. And then what we'll do is we'll give a piece of it to each of them, and then they'll fight each other over it because they'll think they're so different. That's how they actually sit down and talk. They do this. So it's important for us to realize, like I said earlier in this post, grow up. There are beings, like I said, spirits, humans, all sorts of things, devising plans without you knowing it. Because you don't have access to all of the spatials, mainly your own. There are certain things that are being planned with you being considered, as they revealed with the straw man. And the work that shows that we are actually chained kind of to these weird people who have misinterpreted the symbols. So to break those chains simply means that you start to guide your own life, but you need instructions. You need to understand how to program Maya, and you need to understand how to program the illusion now. So now your homework is stacked up for you. Great. This is the experience. Maya is the organic language in which we were using to control the world that is more ethereal and organic. The illusion or the illusion is programmed on logic and often uses letters and numbers as its key components to gaining and maintaining control. Listen to that later on and it'll all make sense. The tesseract, as we see here, skipping past the video, the cross on the second dimension, the cube on the third dimension, and a tesseract on the fourth dimension. And what this is self-explanatory. The people can see that they got us in the two-dimensional state of mind. What I was noticing with as I started to meditate more and more, that when you look at symbols for a long period of time, such as just simple squiggly lines, they start to bend. If your mind starts to bend. They say you're a square. You have to start becoming a sphere, because when you become a sphere, you start noticing that many of these characters actually bend, and then they take on a three-dimensional nature. And then you can see what it really is. But if they're programming with two-dimensional stuff, like we are very familiar with what a cross looks like, then this means that that is the level that they consider that you're on. You're still in a two-dimensional dualistic state. I can tell you people, you need to go to one. All the other 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all of that out there, it's only more fractals. When you collect into one, that's when you get the whole experience, or you plug into everything. You're no longer separate. No one's dividing it for you. There's no more mediators. So we see that, again, one of the major things that I wanted to bring up, because people often question what my authority is. Like, especially the older people, they're like, well, you're 32, or however old I was when I was talking about this kind of stuff, and it's like, we really understand what you're saying, kind of, but you're still young, and that's so, by what authority do you speak? And I've been trying to figure that out too. I think everyone here is on this quest to figure out who they are, and then the more they figure out, the more they actually become fully themselves. And there was a lot of stuff that I was noticing with the synchronization within my name and within numbers and within astrological signs and stuff like that. Stuff that I all threw under the bus, basically, all the time. Because I never wanted to see any logic within this system. I was only discovering higher levels of knowledge. But then once I started to figure out what was true and what was not true by using the universal codes, etc., I started to notice a strange thing with why I was bringing this information. That it was not just by me having this brilliant idea one day to give all the esoteric knowledge that actually controls the world to everyone. It was a process that has started off since the time that I was born. And that has synced me, for better lack of words, synchronization, into being the actual door or the portal of information. And it's funny because we actually started off the resistance with the statement, if you don't see the portal, be the portal. And that was one of the most important things to really latch a hold of, because we started to realize that despite what we were experiencing in this reality, if you weren't going to be able to get the knowledge, if you weren't going to be able to get the truth, then you had to be it for those that weren't able to get it themselves, especially the youth. Like the little kids, man, they're really, really ready for the higher level of truth, and they're counting on us, just like we were counting on many of our presidents and our politicians and even our own parents, counting on them to have this already figured out so we would be experiencing higher levels of positivity, not a dismal, dying prediction for our dimension. And so the reality became, we now have the opportunity to actually turn all that around, because we realize that those who supposedly have the knowledge about how to control this dimension can't use a great deal of that knowledge. They can't. Because it's like blood on their hands. And that's why they say that many of those tombs that were robbed were cursed. Because whatever you got out of it, you still were not going to be able to fully benefit off of what was in there. And in fact, it was going to become your downfall. And this is what just happens with the cause and effect of things that carry such potency. So it will become a time where, it would come to a time where individuals that understood how to interpret the knowledge would get it. And then all the other individuals that had not participated more or less in the direct robbery of the knowledge would be able to receive it. And be able to do more with it than Jesus. As he even says, in the Bible it says, well, they say, Jesus, all the stuff that you're doing, because the reality is that being, as they're describing it, did not exist. But they're saying, with all the stuff that you're doing, are the people who follow you going to be able to do this? He said, these things, but more. And it's more because that one didn't really exist. You can do more things than what is described in that New Testament. But the knowledge of how to do that must be acquired. You must know all the wisdom of the Kemetans, not the Egyptians. The Egyptians were the gypsies. Like that's why the Egyptians don't Ogiajita. All that was when the knowledge had already been corrupted. When they were actually taking the knowledge around, trying to predict people's future with it for money. And still getting cursed. Look at the many of how continuously, especially in Las Vegas, the gypsies still live some type of unfortunate life. They can produce everyone else's future but their own. It's because they're using the knowledge stolen from Egypt and calling themselves the gypsies as if they are from Egypt. But it wasn't Egypt. It was Kemet. So when you learn the knowledge of Kemet, which has a lot more to do with chemistry and alchemy and the internal body, and how to use the herbs and the elements in a positive way, then you actually go into the higher states of consciousness and not before then. That's why no one else is really, a lot of the masters have not gone there, because the ones who are actually interpreting that knowledge are interpreting it from what they put into it. And I have a whole book about this now. It's 700 and something pages fully illustrated. A whole book that shows them defacing statues, knocking off the noses because the noses could not be described as being Anglo. Doing different things like making statues to later on tell people that this was the original and then all the other ones are gone. Or they're saying that Ramses destroyed all the monuments and defaced the tombs, and they're naming monuments and tombs that didn't exist until after Ramses. So the thing is that we have been hoodwinked, bamboozled people. We are connected, but the main thing is to begin to understand who is with wholeness and who is outside of wholeness, still coming forth with the craziness of keeping us all divided, but by not letting us know how we're all together. Remember, when we say, oh, we all need to come together, someone needs to explain how we're going to do that. It's an idea first. Then people have to find the common integers of how we are all really connected. And those answers have to satisfy the people who hear them. That becomes one of the main things. Those answers have to satisfy people, and they say, okay, now I understand. And I see how came from Venus, because the portals of Vista. And actually, it keeps bringing out pentagrams. It traces pentagrams in the sky. And then most of our fruit here is pentagrams. And then Venus is like the Empress. So could it be that a great deal of life that is being birthed here is coming from Venus? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you want to understand it, or they call it amor. It's where you get the term Roma, and it also means son of Venus. So it's important for us to look, and now, as I was pointing out, you have Mars, the wolf, and Sirius, the dog star. So you have all of these other components with all these other creatures that live around us to give you the extraterrestrial story, except it's not extra. It's inner. And we're riding along with it. Why we're still playing around in this externalized world that we don't even know how to program. That's what the reality is becoming. Because they're shifting the system in this reality to the Illuzion program, most people are not familiar with that code and they're not being instructed. Why they operate on Maya, and that's their dream world. So normally they would be able to jump out of this kind of situation anyway, except now their dream world is being hacked through their behavior in the illusion. So this is why we have to grasp things fast. It would be the same thing as when you experience someone messing with your system and they're messing it up. It's like a virus in your system. You have to act to fix it. And I'm giving you the key components of fixing it. It's to understand what these shapes, sounds, letters, numbers, symbols mean. Then everything is cleared up. You have nothing to be fighting against, nothing to be arguing about, and you start to slightly alter your state of consciousness in this world, and you correct your wobble, and then you spin faster, and then you're aware at that point of the rest of us collected already in wholeness, giving this information and on missions, doing actual things that equal people getting to the higher state of consciousness, because that's what our duty is here. So we see next the card of fortitude. We're actually, let me check the time here, about an hour and 14 minutes. We got about 22 minutes left. And there's a couple questions. I'm going to take questions for the last 15 minutes of this actual program, but I wanted to breeze through this just a little bit so that people can understand what's really coming across here, and then maybe we'll continue next week. What you see in the card of fortitude, as I was saying, there's individuals that are already in the know. Some of them have these different decks. They don't look like the other tarot decks. Because the other tarot decks are built just like all the rest of the confusion. But then there's some, because they're used to train the individuals that they want to understand what all these symbols mean, even though they won't be able to activate it, which is what they figure out later on. And then they have to settle for a lesser power. It shows you here that the fortitude, or to have the mental and emotional strength when facing difficulty, adversity, and danger, to do that courageously, you will need what's here. And what they're showing you that's here is they're showing you this connection that this Empress has with the Kundalini. That is what is being shown. The actual connection with nature and with where the energy comes from to power up our chakra centers. It shows, in addition to that, the lion of this world, because remember, the actual symbol for who's controlling the world is a lion, and there's different colors according to their character. There's a gold lion, etc. The red lion is known to be the one that is causing the most war, pestilence, famine. They say the lion that roars about seeking to see who he can devour. And then you see that lion standing on top of the pyramid, which shows you a certain kind of geometry. It mainly shows you the eight-pointed star of the Ilu, or the Illuminati, a star of Ishtar. They show you then the five-pointed star, which is the Syrian star, or the Abrak, the 365. And then they show you the pyramids inverted. So, and then below that, they show a square with more geometry on it. So what this is saying is the actual geometrical nature of this reality is being controlled by the red lion personality. However, to put the red lion in check, you need to access your connection in your ground, your root. Okay? And then you will become as strong as the pillars. As you see behind her, there are pillars. There's the Jacob and Boaz pillar, which just means strength and fortitude within themselves. So the pillar is there to explain again that when you access this energy, you will be immovable. Unless you want to move, as far as where your consciousness is, how much people have control over you, etc., etc. In addition to that, I felt it was very important because I was wanting to interpret what the Universal Mother really is to people, especially within the last 2 weeks. But many people were getting confused for the goddess. In fact, when they were visualizing it, they were visualizing it more as a seductive goddess coming to initiate them into some type of mystery, etc. But that is not the image of the Universal Mother. The Universal Mother is actually a non-sexual symbol, and that's why the indigenous, as you'll see on live stream, the indigenous and many of the elders and ancients actually depicted the Universal Mother as basically a very voluptuous mother that could bring the child or birth the child and take care of the child, nurse the child, etc. So there was nothing perverted about that. People, it's most important now to realize that what has happened to our knowledge is the same thing that's happening to the internet right now. It's just porn everywhere. You go to Facebook, there's porn. You go to Pirate Bay, there's porn. You go to Google, there's porn. They didn't even used to have porn. You go to YouTube, there's porn. So they're doing the same, they did the same thing. Not they're doing, because the spirituality came way before the internet. They did the same thing with spirituality. So everything just became sexual. And sexual is only one component to our enlightenment. Only one. So, again, we get another card after we pass Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, or depictions of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. We find the Fool actually going down by. And I'm actually going to continue the show. I know it's kind of going to run out here in a moment, but I'm going to continue. And once it kind of cuts off, and then we'll come back, because I do want to kind of finish this post, because it's going to be really the tune of a lot of the knowledge that we're going to be bringing out from here, and also something I feel like people need to know whether I'm here or whether I'm not here. And so, because again, as I put in the last part of this post, we get very little support, so it's really becoming a question now how we're going to keep going. But it doesn't matter. That's why I always rush to give out all of the knowledge as soon as possible, because of not knowing at what state I'm going to be able not to continue or how far I will be able to go. But of course, my idea is forever, until everyone walks out of the matrix. So the reality is, this next card shows someone walking into the matrix, what they call the real rabbit hole. And it's important because the symbolism is always being used all the time, and the terminology is always being used, but no one really knows where it stems from. Now, rabbits are fertile, and so anytime a rabbit is mentioned, it's mentioned as a fertile component only. They discard what the animal really means from one level beside its constellation correlation. So what happens is that what they're saying is the rabbit hole has the ability to make more holes continuously. And we find out that that's Phi. Phi has the ability to create more and more worlds. And when you stand it up on itself, it looks like doors. So basically, if you started to go into these doors of your consciousness, which has already happened, people, and you start to get too deep in there, if you don't leave some breadcrumbs behind you, after a while you'll realize, I'm lost. And this is what happens when a person starts to try to find something, but not using any integers to say, okay, I'm here now. Okay, I'm there now. You see? So that's why I'm attempting to give everyone key integers to use on the path, so that it's like a breadcrumb, so they'll know when they've been down one of those corridors before and when they're actually headed outside of this whole thing. So we know that the card of the Fool is still, he has that pack on his back, because they say inside of that pack contains everything. That the Fool actually knows everything already. But because the Fool keeps walking through all these doors and keeps looking for it outside of himself, he never finds it. And she never finds it. So what they're encouraged to do is to ground, stop for a moment, unpack your bag, all your talents, etc. Sort things out. So that way you can actually become in a position to continuously move on. Now, let's talk about Phi, because when you start talking about this kind of stuff, people just, oh, there's mathematics. I don't really understand things. There's nothing about spirituality that's math. It sounds like it's analytical, it's masculine, it's science, it's logical. So people go into that and they just totally miss it. It's very simple to understand this, and it's only a few things you need to understand. I already said, it's about Phi. Because Phi is about the fire, and fire means Yah, Yah means spirit, etc. So these are things that you have to get familiar with, so you'll understand how you got here and why is this taking place. How can I morph into other elements besides just fire, man? So what happens is, upset. So what happens is you see that Leonardo da Vinci had already put this together, but this actual picture here of the man standing inside the pentagram is from one of Agrippa's occult philosophies, which are garbage. I actually got a headache after looking through 700 and something pages of pure nonsense. A book clearly written to just throw a person off. There was and it just shows you there's nothing that they really understood about spirituality yet during those times, coming from those people. And those people, the same Zionistic Brotherhood and elders of Zion and all them, they're the ones who actually wrote the Bibles, etc. So if they didn't understand it then when they were giving it to the king, what the hell makes us understand and think they understood it now? They didn't want to understand it because it locked them out. It's conscious. Knowledge is conscious. When real knowledge comes across, one or two things are going to happen with the person. They're going to say, I don't get it. Or they're going to say, oh my goodness, it's now all connecting for me. And the ones that don't get it still have work to do. And hopefully they can find out what that work really is. A lot of times it just takes concentration and to sit down and to be focused, because again, the fool is just running looking for things, and even though it finds the truth, it goes to find something else. So this kind of behavior is what we call double-mindedness. So as we continue, you actually see that the pentagram, Phi, which is the golden mean, which is that spiral that they show in that video. It's important to watch the video because they'll show a lot about how it just keeps spawning and spawning and spawning, and how most of creation runs on this code. So, it's important to understand the Phi nature of the reality. because it's being used on you all the time, you become a proper navigator. You don't actually become like you're not inverted in it. Notice the way that this guy is actually positioned in this pentagram is very similar to the machine that they put you in before you're about to go to space, or you're about to fly very fast craft. Then they turn this wheel, and I think it's called a gyro something, but they turn this wheel, and then all of a sudden you start spinning in all these different directions. And the reason why they do that is to get you acclimated of what it's going to be like to be in 0-point gravity. So they got this from understanding what it's like to be outside of the body. There's no gravity. So you have to understand how to maneuver yourself and where you're positioned, etc. And so it's still a very high level of knowledge that's being transmitted across the dimension to get us prepared to understand how to navigate the other dimension. It's just that the current regime is interpreting, like I said, the current regime is interpreting what I'm explaining to you right now in a different way, where they'll take the pentagram, draw it on the floor, and tell you profusely that you can bring back Met. But the person never realizes that, yes, they can. But it's because of how much dark intention is put into bringing something negative that wholly exists on your energy. So if you're capable of actually bringing it, it's sucking your energy from the moment it comes out of the portal. And that's the situation that they've got themselves in. They're running from their own shadow. That's what we showed here. And that's what happens with these their own shadow them. The mediator is now on the side of the darker side of them because it chooses what the darker side of them wants to do more. And thus they end up locked in this world that they created. So that's what Creed says. I created my own prison. Yeah, it's possible. You can definitely create your own prism. And that's why it's also important to make sure that you don't make agreements of things that you're going to do far out into the future, because you're already agreeing to be here. You shall always act on that moment and then remain clear from any other time, because remaining clear actually allows you to be everything. And that's why I believe it's about somewhere in the 5 or 6 minutes in stealing your mind, stealing it back from the Archon, stealing your mind and letting nothing come across it opens up this other field. And most people have never seen that because they can't stop talking in their mind for over 30 seconds. But it's called Zen. It's the ability to actually still the mind completely and then begin to operate in the other facility while you still got your eyes open and you're still there. You don't even need to go to sleep. So there's higher levels of this. So once again, I go further because we have now El makes another appearance. Now, the big revelation to me just recently was that none of the Canaanites were what I thought they were, but I won't get into that anymore because I think I've gotten to enough of who what was, and we just start to figure out there's a trend going on here. But I started to say that basically the elders definitely had a different appearance than us. In my occasion of being able to see some of these other kind of beings, the main thing that I noticed was their eyes. And that their eyes tend to be either shaped different or much larger than ours. And sometimes the heads were a lot larger. So I think that's the only, like we show in the chart of the Code of the Matrix, the only thing extraterrestrial about the ancestors was their actual brains and eyes and components and different things had a tendency to be more amplified in certain areas. Just as now you would see like a bat has the sonar capability and the bird has the ability to fly. The ancients were also archetyped too when they were coming directly from the source. And so many of them had already had some of the components that are encased within these animals' senses, but they were glorified, for better lack of words, because they were closer to the originals. To settle it once and for all, the Aryans were mixed people. They were not white skinheads and they were not Samuel Jackson. So the reality becomes the Sumerians, that they were given the color blue in the They were given the color of the blue in the Hindu Puranas and the Sanskrit texts because they were saying they came from the sky. They weren't really saying that they had blue skin. So people need to really, really understand that where the symbolism, when it uses a color, it's only seeking to explain something, not at times the deeper literal meanings that we actually, or the surface literal meanings that we actually take. So again, they were blue because they said they came from the sky. They came from the sky in their state of mind. They were very lofty, non-grounded. They sneered at what the grounded or mud people were actually doing. They never ventured out to understand their culture before they eradicated it, etc., etc. So that was Aryan behavior. And they, again, swept across the land and are still sweeping across the land. And that's where this becomes a real-time mission, because this idea, as we talk about the Nazi idea, a Nazi is not a black person or a white person. It's an idea. It's a regime. It has a lot to do with Monsanto's, and there's all kinds of people that work there. It has a lot to do with the United Nations, and they got somebody from every country working there. So as you see, it does not discriminate as we discriminate sometimes. So it's important to understand who you're really joining with at times, and don't look at the skin color to determine that. So what ends up happening is that I have this call to the many mansions, which came out of a very old book called the Horn Book of Hermes, which has, been thrown under the carpet because the guy, it's a really old book, but it's supposed to be to teach kids. But it actually syncs up words just like we sync them up now, but he gets a lot closer to their original meanings because he's more closer to when these words are actually being formulated. So here it talks clearly about this double, or this dual nature of our personality, where we started to become scared of our other self, as they call it. And this is what obviously locks a person out of the dream world, is when they're not ready to experience themselves, then they're not ready to experience. I mean, how far can you really go with not wanting to know who you are? And that's why there's a big level of misidentity going on with the masses, because they're always concerned with what everyone else is doing. Like, what is Beyonce doing, and what is Ron Paul doing? Remember, all these individuals are simply set up more if they're not talking about this stuff, which is what needs to happen during right now. If they're not talking about this, then it means that they either don't know, or they're being used by the side that wants to just waste everyone's time and never give them the mysteries. If Ron Paul doesn't get up on stage and talk about the fine nature to the pentagram and why there's 51 of them or 50 of them on our flag, etc., then that means that that individual is not ready to get everyone to where they need to go. If he's not going to bring the files, etc. So this is what happens. We can no longer stick around for anyone that does not want to continuously bring levels of truth. It's better to just stay in meditation. As I say in the end of this, because I'm about to wrap things up, I say when you know how these connect, this shows the pentagram and the golden mean, when you know how these connect, you have uncovered a great mystery. Because actually you start to unlock yourself. Because the pentagram is a pen. Like the penitentiary. It's a place to keep people held in. That's why it means a nook or a small room. It's like a training module that you're kept in until you understand how to get out. When somehow they figure when you understand how to get out, then you actually understand how to interact with the next dimension that you'll be going into. And so it's important for us now to come together with the knowledge, the real stuff, to not be shy at expressing what we know, to not pervert our knowledge, our symbols, our laws, our rules. If you scroll down, you'll see I bring up two really good examples of when the knowledge is perverted. Like when you look at the meaning that is given behind the goat, and how the goat becomes some symbol of craziness and evil and the devil and all of this. And then, like, if you meet a goat in real life, it's like not like that. It's because of the over-exaggeration of these Sumerians who were shown in the picture of the sacrifice and goat represented to Ishtar. People were presenting to the fertility goddess for a prolonged period of time, but in their minds. There was never any, they only understood it as, I feel fertile, I'm about to go and make a child, thank you, fertilization component. Because they could recognize the fertilization component in the season. Because they noticed during certain seasons, all the animals went into heat. And the goat is one of the only animals that, well, it's not one of the only ones, but it's one of the main animals that in its mating procedure, it only goes in the heat and then it's supposed to be paired up with another goat right then. And then after that, there's no more goat thing going on. So it was strictly a symbol that the caretaking that had to go with reproducing was within that symbol. But you see how it becomes something totally different now. Like I said, even the symbol of the Capricorn, which gets demonized, and it's a goat, it's a fish, and it's when the fish came with the goats, and blah, 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 and it only has to do with the season changing. So I'm going to go ahead and take some calls now. We're going to push the show into about 15 more minutes. If you do have a question, we actually had 2 callers, but if you do have a question, I encourage you to call in to area code 347-996-5688. And ask your question today, and your question will get answered. And then at that point, if you can get your questions answered, then you will definitely be going into the higher state of consciousness, because that is what is available today. And so we have about 2 more minutes and 23 seconds in the show on the clock. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 15 more minutes here after the countdown. But I'm going to begin that after the countdown, and that way I don't have to hear the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to take a little 7-minute break, 8-minute break. We're going to allow me to get a little bit of something to drink so that I can clear up my throat. And then I'm going to take the caller from the 404 area code, and I'm going to take the caller from the 843 area code, and we're going to get this solved.
It is my desire, if not my duty, to try to talk to you journeymen with some candor about what is happening to radio and television. And if what I say is responsible, I alone am responsible for the saying of it. Our history will be what we make of it. And if there are any historians about 50 or 100 years from now, and there should be preserved the kinescopes of 1 week of all 3 networks, they will there find, recorded in black and white and in color, evidence of decadence, escapism, and insulation from the realities of the world in which we live. We are currently wealthy, fat, comfortable, and complacent. We have a built-in allergy to unpleasant or disturbing information. Our mass
90 seconds.
But unless we get up off our fat surpluses and recognize that television in the main is being used to distract, delude, amuse, and insulate us, then television and those who finance it, those who look at it, and those who work at it may see a totally different picture too late.
Okay, everyone, it's about 60 more seconds left in this. As I said, we're going to come back and we're going to actually answer questions. We're going to take a little, about 20 more minutes, or however long it takes to answer these questions. If you want to call in and ask a question and you have something that you really, really need to get clarity on, that number is area code 347-996-5688. And that will get you directly to me, and you press 1, and then I will see that you have a question on my studio display here. And like I said, we're just going to take as much time as it takes to get these questions out. We're going to start with area code 404. And caller, you are on the air with Universal Current Show, episode 3. And we're just definitely getting it all out today. How can we assist you?
Peace, hope, peace and love. Yeah, you was speaking in your blog earlier about the exchange, the rectangle part of the money, and you were saying that how it opened doors. Could you go in a little in depth with that? And I have another question too, if you don't mind.
Okay, well,
we'll talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, you were saying about Michael Jackson earlier, and I've been, studying Michael Jackson a little bit, and I want to know how, he played into the metaphysical part of our time right now on this plane, as far as because he was always surrounded by kids. He did things that no other human being did during our time on this planet. So I'll let you speak.
All right. Okay. So let's just start off first with that door. And again, as we look at the mysteries, what we see is that when something, it's almost like how this Kabbalah works. As you see that certain symbols mean certain things, and then it's just as far as you can take it. So with the triangle, with the rectangle, or when the rectangle becomes a door, then if you shape money like that, then it programs a person in their mind to say, this also is a door, it's my access. Because they geometrically think that way. See, when you're shaped as phi, like our bone structure is shaped as phi, etc., then what happens is that anything that resonates to that becomes attractive to us. And that's why they were saying the ones that have the closest towards phi in their appearance actually are attractive, while the ones that are further away from that are actually just not attractive to us. And this becomes something like a molding, and that's why we have to break this mold. Because I'm more than sure over a period of time of being into the phi reality, then you would think that you really are phi, that you're just this shape. And that's why people put the pentagram on their body and put the pentagram, because it's a psychological saying that I'm this. But then it's self-identified because it has 5 points, etc., etc. So how this works with the dimension in the the rectangle, is that symbol becomes to people their current. It becomes their energy. And that's why in magic, another person will pick up the pentagram, which is the same thing. And they'll say, this is my current, this is my energy. Even though it doesn't work well. Just like the money doesn't work well. Because the original use of it is a door to another state of consciousness. It has nothing to do with anything in physicality. And so now that it becomes that shape, it's also a door to a certain place. And this is where it gets deeper for those that are understanding that kind of knowledge. And so far, because you see the pentagram is related to civilization, it appears that the rectangle and the pentagram and these shapes, while still being training modules, over a period of time hamper a person's consciousness. So in order not to go into duality with it, because duality is employed by us, it's better for us to look at it as we are going beyond the system. But in order to go beyond something, if it's put itself in your way, like we were talking about on the show, it becomes like a block in your way, then you have to solve it. Solving is to solve is to make it solvable, to make it disappear. To do that, at times you have to show it itself. And this is the idea of the fourth dimension. You collapse 2 waves against each other, and then they both dissolve and create a space of no time. So we actually figure out in our reality that the reason why what we fear is around us is because it is us. And our society is designed for us to fear ourselves. And then when books are shaped, they're shaped like that rectangle too. And then we go into the book, and then we go into it like, in this case the Bible, we go into it like a spiraling door after door. And so this is a little bit about how this works. But to understand how it works is to understand infinity. It just keeps going. So we could be on the phone talking all day about how this reality is phi-based. Now, a little about Michael Jackson. First of all, in this system, because remember, those who were involved with Michael Jackson, including his parents, were already aware. There are many parents, like Nas's father. They were already aware of Kabbalah and many of the laws and the rules of Kabbalah. In addition to that, you have these spirits, and this is what I've noticed that goes on, that when you're about to name a child, the spirit speaks in the mind, and then next thing you know, the child ends up with a name that the spirit has recommended. That even the child themselves seem to already be, quote unquote, possessed by another energy, which gives them these talents and these abilities. So we understand that the biorhythm and the connection that we all share, when it's really close with very intelligent beings, then we have an opportunity to, just like anyone else that has that individual in their family, access them. So I believe Michael Jackson, because Jack, or as in the Union Jack, is mainly I had a finite breakdown of what Jack actually means, but it actually means an individual that is ready to receive energy. They're ready to receive something. And I have several movies that show you the Jack character, and when Jack comes on, and then the whole movie is attempting to change him into this ultimate archetype. So in this case, Jack's son, as you see, the son is in the back, and then you have John's sons too. It's easier to catch this with John's son, because John, as we talked about before, in the Aryan culture is Ion, or basically their end-all, finish-all. So when someone's named Johnson, as most of the Africans were given that last name that had come into the United States, then it links them or chains them to the Aryan. You see what I mean? And so this is how we all kind of end up getting connected through several different ways. And that's why sometimes they call it crabs in the bucket. And that's why slaves have chains, because they're actually connected. They're becoming connected. And when you have that last name, then you get connected. So with Michael Jackson, he became connected. And that's why, again, the 1, 2, 3 was a Masonic song. And this is all taking place in Motown with Berry Gordy and these individuals who are already getting knowledge from Kabbalah, from the Moorish side of things. So this knowledge, Kabbalah, is not Jewish, as we know Jews. They have a certain part of it. But because it belonged to 12 or in the hidden 13 tribe, then they didn't have all of it. And so there were groups, and I have some pictures. I'm still making a decision whether or not I'm going to actually publish this book, or not publish it, but just put it onto the internet, because it's not going to be accessed any other way. But the language is really rough in it, which is the only decision that I have to make. But it literally shows the transformation of deities and things of a nature of power, and who is actually doing that. So I guess in conclusion, what we can say is there were very aristocratic families from all races. And I'll publish these pictures, because you can look at these people's faces and know that whatever bloodline they're from, and they come from all different skin colors, they are the purest. Their skin doesn't have any pigmentations or anything. Their eyes are very clear. They almost look as if they are wearing makeup, but makeup didn't exist in that day. And so you get a chance to look and see, and they talk about the end of this era, which people think that the end of the aristocratic era has not happened, but it actually happened already, and then now they're they're trying to regain lost territory that was overrun by basically the slaves. So what happened is that when you look at this poem that's written, and I won't be able to pull this right away so everyone can see it on live stream, but what it says is that there became a time where the princes were smashed against the walls, and that the harlots spoke wrath with the king. And so what all they're describing basically is that there came a time where all of these aristocratic Aryan individuals were thrown out into the streets by the people because of the way that they were ruling. And then once that happened, which is kind of what the precept of this world is actually at now, what happened after that is once they got rid of them, then there was chaos, because the real bad guy showed up, for better lack of words. And I think this is in the movie Rango. They said, you get rid of that snake, or you get rid of that bird, the snake's going to come. Meaning that if you throw some system off of balance and you don't have a plan of what you're going to do next, you're actually going to bring something worse. So what ends up happening with individuals such as Michael Jackson, you see, is that they realize at some point in their lives that they are harboring a higher level of intelligence. They stop thinking outside of themselves. Some may do it and never lose that connection, like someone that has a special friend and never loses connection with a special friend. While others, because they're being told so much, it's really you, like when you're a star or actor, they're really into telling you that it's all you. So that way you can convey that to the reality, like, look where I am. But if they really told you the truth, they would say, you're one of the larger spirits. But we're all spirits. and we're all connected. They don't tell them that. They just tell them, you're actually separate. You're the greatest, etc. So when you feel, because then it actually locks this powerful being also within their own mind, because they don't understand how they're connected to everyone. So when they go out there, they don't use all their money to help everyone and use their star power, etc. to help everyone. They use it only to accumulate more. And so what ends up happening is that at some point, I'm sure, just as with many of us happening now, we realize that we are those larger spirits. And that, but there's a connection to something else, and we keep reading about it, and it's all these books. And all it keeps saying is that you are so close to understanding the truth, while others are much further behind. However, you can help those, or you can help them, or you can hurt them. But you must make a decision now. Because now you know that every move that you're making is either helping or hurting something. So if you do that blindly, like living life drunk, and that's why they would call it, most people are inverted pentagrams, they're upside down. They live life without any bearing. The actual phi keeps spiraling, just like the money. It keeps spiraling, going down, and coming up again. So as that actually happens, who can gain bearing? That's where the ultimate test is being accomplished, is why you're experiencing this, not allowing it to consume you, whether it's because you found all this out and now you hate everyone, or you can't even figure any of this out because your life is just going too fast, etc. So what it becomes is still the person who can think, what do we do next? And this asks this question to themselves, like, now that I know this, what should I do? I should not make this my enemy. So that's how deep the level of knowledge keeps going, because when you step outside of the individuality, you realize that you can neutralize all of your enemies. But for many individuals, when going through life and carrying very large spirits, they figured out very late in the game that how much control they really had. Like, I think that Michael Jackson, earlier in his career, was clearly not understanding what was going on with the spiritual level of things beside what he was able to tap into. But then later on, he started to get an idea of what he could really do, but still chose not to do anything. And then at a certain point, when he finally decided to make the move, that's when it was already him going through such a long life of actually still leading people in a direction that is still not in the direction of truth. And that really becomes hard for people to accept about some of the world personalities that they see as their mentors. But there's really only one set of knowledge here. And if a person is not talking about that, then it means that they're taking you in the thigh. It's like if they are trying to convert it into something else so that you can understand it, that's one thing. But when it starts getting it just doesn't remain cohesive, either because of the way the person is behaving or what they're doing, or maybe what they're saying they're doing. Like, remember when Michael Jackson made some of the most positive songs, then next thing you know, they throw one of these cases on him, and then it's got everyone thinking, well, that song, who knows what he really meant in that song. So that's what kind of happens, and that's what one lives with when they have not completely neutralized that other side of them, which most people are not aware of. That's the agreements. The agreements still hold. So if one does not confront those agreements and straighten those things out, then they're not able to fully do what they need to do. And I think what happened with Michael Jackson is there's definitely many agreements that were made and many contracts that were signed that had to be approached from a spiritual level, not just, okay, forget those contracts, I'm just going to say what I need to say. But he did still get his message across before leaving. But again, big souls, because we see with Michael Jackson, individuals like that, they have a heavy pharaonic descendancy. Same thing with Obama and Michelle Obama. Now they're saying they may be DNA clones. That was still, I don't know what the difference is between a spirit and a non-spirit. I don't know what kind of interpretation these people are trying to give things. But the reality becomes, when you have and you're possessing a character, and then that character magnetizes multiple characters, it's because the spirit itself resonates with all of the spirits that are actually saying, this is the person that I believe in. It is now unfortunate that because the controllers know that, they grab people out of bloodlines. and then make them do things that are opposite to the truth so that it perpetuates the confusion more. And so I can still say how many people spiritually progress through Michael Jackson's teachings. That's kind of how I look at everything now. How many people are spiritually progressing through the teachings of Jay-Z? How many people are spiritually progressing through the teachings of Obama, etc.? So when we look at it like that, then it allows us to remove this feeling of us having to respect someone because everyone else is respecting them, and just cut right through and get to the truth. So, caller, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a second caller because I know people have a certain time lot that they do for this show, and I know I didn't answer questions earlier, but hopefully that does clear up a lot of what's going on in as far as your questions about these situations.
Okay, thank you.
No doubt. Okay, caller from the area code 615, you're on the Universal Current show. How can we assist you?
Peace. My question is, what I want to know in this new day and time, everyone talking about these paradigm shifts that's going on, and like people having the ability to create, and people are talking about the power that people are coming into. And on one of your shows, I heard you talking about the tetrahedron and how there's this ability to create anything in this reality with the tetrahedron, but you said you wouldn't use that to create for the wrong reason, whatever. But I was wondering if were you talking about a physical tetrahedron or some type of mental projection, and could you go into more of how that is done?
For sure.
And related to that, why don't I see a lot of New Age people talking about these abilities, but I don't see any of it being displayed anywhere. It's just like in the church, they talk about healing all the time, but you never really see anybody get healed. I don't see anyone manifesting anything, you know?
Man, finally a real question. I appreciate you asking that question, man, because that question right there gets to me all the time, and I wonder why people don't ask that question, because that's the question that I ask. And I'll explain to you the absolute truth about this programming and these powers and these abilities. First of all, you can't program this reality with a tetrahedron. But the reason why I said I wouldn't do it is because still building more things in this reality should be in question, just like whether you should be bringing kids into this reality right now. There's certain things that I need to know are going to be situated before I decide to keep building anything on the level as strong as a tetrahedron in this reality. So now how does that happen? How does this power come about? And why are so many people not displaying this power? Well, first of all, the reason why so many people are not displaying this power is because they don't have it. Now, why don't they have it? Because the knowledge was with the Kemet's. Like, it was the Kemet's. That's where we get our word chemistry. So if a person doesn't understand the knowledge of the Kemet's, which is the root to all the knowledge that was brought forth from this planet, then they only can speculate about how to activate. So what do the Kemet's teach? Well, I don't think there's too many people on this line. So what the Kemet's were teaching is that there were certain plants, mainly a tree, that gave you the ability to actually go into the state. If for some reason you lost the ability to go to the state is the original state of being, then there were plants that still had that original state within them, and they were called like pure plants, or there's another term they give it, but it basically means a plant that's never been defiled, like we were talking about the incorruptible stone. Now, this plant in particular comes to us today as the cassia, which is where the word acacia comes from, which is acacia. Even the acacia berry or acai berry is the berry with the highest amount of antioxidants and all that stuff that really gets you feeling into a higher state of consciousness as it starts to go through your body. So remember, there are certain superfoods that actually take the body into the state of consciousness to get you only prepped for getting ready to enter into this altered state of consciousness. This altered state of consciousness can allow you to see, meaning the Kasiya, can allow you to see this reality that you can see easily how the reality can be programmed with tetrahedrons when you have ingested the Kasiya tree. Now, so remember, you have two different states. You have one person who already knows how to do it. So there's nothing for them to talk about, and there's definitely nothing for them to show people. Then you have this other person who has not achieved it yet. And so they're kind of like on the other side of the fence. So as they start to look for it, they start to find clues. Like the first thing that started to lead me as clues in the spiritual text were they kept calling it the name. In other books, you'll find that they mention he was given the name. And he was to come, but they could not say the name. And so I started saying, well, what is this name? And I went on my little Ponce de Leon, my own little Ponce de Leon thing to find that name. Now, the sheer intention of wanting to find that name is what made that name do something when I finally came across it. So understand, some people try to cheat and they just say, well, what's the name? And even if you gave them the name, because they put no effort into getting it, then it doesn't work. So this is what starts to happen with all of these people who have these huge budgets to go around and to actually start all these ashrams and clinics and things like that. But they're all in there, have geeked up off goji berries, but very little manifestation at all as far as on a spiritual plane. Because who's not there? In most of these sectors, there's no one there that is authentically spiritually inclined. All of them have more or less purchased their spirituality. So what happens within those league of people is that they're only able to reach a certain level, and one level they don't hit is physical manifestation on this reality to show other individuals. Such things will have the men in black dropping out of the sky, for real. The moment that a human actually goes into an activated state, if they're not ordained to then go forth with their power to do something, then they're shut down almost immediately and isolated. Meaning that they generally get them out of that country into another country through what appears like their own suggestion. And that's what happened to me. When I was in Atlanta and I activated, I could read minds easily. Like you looked at a person and it just all came through. But the weird part is you didn't want to read everyone's mind. There was something about the power where you didn't want to use it. It just kind of worked automatically. And that's kind of how I think you deal with people that are dealing with the truth versus imposters. Because imposters are always trying to make it happen, while the truth is trying to actually just get his mind clear, or her mind clear. And then the power is working because it's constantly wanting you to do something. So when you see in the person's mind that they have strife and stress, then you actually go and talk to them. Now remember, most people don't even go to talk to each other. They just kind of like don't know what's going on. So that's why, power and abilities gives you just more stuff to do. It's like you're tasked more to help humanity. And you feel that responsibility even more because you can't let one go by. So it's like if you hear one person's mind and they're stressed out, and you may have like a busy schedule that day and really need to go for some reason because your heart is fully activated to give you this power. Even one of them, you sit down and even be late just to give that person the good news. So that you do see people utilizing the real power on this reality, but it has nothing to do with throwing lightning from the hands and cowering the Illuminati with lightning rays, etc. It has more to do with a service that's done to other souls that are so close to gaining their next level of the path. And then they just need a little bit of instruction. And so that's all a person needs. Anything else that you're doing in front of them is actually going to really thwart their spiritual growth. Like if they see you move objects across the room with your mind, how long is it going to be before they realize or start to feel like you're different than them? That they can achieve what you achieved. And so then they start to worship you. And that actually loses the point altogether. Because the point is to turn them into being able to do that. But if they're witnessing it before it's their time to understand how it works, mainly mental things that are going on wrong, imbalances that are going on wrong, that if they had the power, you would actually witness them destroy you with it. Because they would get the I have to kill the master to gain his energy syndrome. So there is a deeper level to what we're discussing. And that's why I said certain people need to factor in at times what is really being thought about And that will actually allow them to know whether it's possible. Like, for instance, a good example is I had a friend that was saying, there's this bank that's just started that has all of the seeds and all the flora and fauna that exists in the world. And I think it's over there in Europe, and they have a battle station around it, like it has batterments so that it can protect itself. And what they're saying is that and then it's in a bunker so it can't be blown up. And they're saying that if the world comes to an end, they'll be able to start the world over again. So this is what the person's explaining to me. And they're like, I need to leave my job right now because I think that my real calling is to go around the world and to collect all the seeds and things like that so that when something does happen, we'll all have still the stuff that we have here. And I asked the person, I said, do you actually think that in the time in which would come that we would need those seeds that you have, that we wouldn't have already went through a time that either had one or two things going on? Complete madness, so that when we planted your seeds, someone would actually come and steal all of it from us. Or almost no people that live here, so that when we went to come get your seeds, there was already abundance of crops and things that were already overgrown, because that's what the nature does when we're not here. So that person thought about it, and then I said, so that's what we keep doing. What we keep doing is we keep making all these grand plans, and we set this timeline out in the future. But the higher beings don't see us like that. They see us when we make the decision. This is the most important thing to know. When a person says in their heart that they are truly ready to ascend and go to the next level, do you think that they can lie to the higher beings? The higher beings know if they are going to do that, but it's going to be 8 months later. So they wait till 8 months later before they give the person the abilities. They don't give the person the abilities then and then wait till 8 months later for them to fully make the decision. It doesn't work like that. So when a person is in full agreement to not be in duality anymore, because a lot of people say, well, I'm not in duality. When you're truly not in duality, because you get into a higher state of consciousness, something happens. It's like you feel something weird, like it's very vivid. Because you fully made that agreement. But if you don't fully make that agreement, don't think anything is going to happen, because the higher beings can see us like a timeline. They know when we're actually really going to do that. While we generally live like we say we're going to do something, but we don't really mean right then. And so hopefully that answers your question about these higher spiritual powers, because to know, to dare, to will, and then finally to keep silent. When you get to the level of being able to fully will, which is to be able to make stuff come out of nowhere, you're definitely not trying to tell anyone about it. Because the reality becomes is that kind of thing, when is the last time you've seen it? So when do you think you're ready to see it? It would be easier for you to witness it from you doing it, rather than being unfortunate enough to be in front of someone who's going to do that in front of you. Because if someone then is going to do that in front of you, that means that their spiritual power is definitely either they're using a hoax, or their spiritual power is definitely on another level. So you're actually in more of a disadvantage. And if they actually are doing silly stuff like moving objects around the table, then you're also in the presence of someone who has now extreme ego and still figured out somehow how to unlock the pingala, or the actual red line of their kundalini, and they're fastly headed towards death. Generally, if you watch them, you probably can count them out 3 more years before they die. But the reality is they've unlocked only one side, which is capable of moving and doing certain material things, but it's fastly burning up the person's system. And so so of course he doesn't have time to figure out where you are to show you the power. So that's why you don't see people that really are having the power out in open display, because real energy rips holes in this reality. Remember, it does that on 2 levels. It does that when you do it in front of someone, man, you just rip their reality. Nothing will ever be the same. It's important that, like I talked about the Kasiya is more governed to do that. It's been ordained to take a person out of the reality, because it can get you back. Notice if you have this special power and you do something and someone goes crazy immediately because you just threw them in the shock, can you bring them back? So that's what it really becomes. And so that's why such things are always kept veiled, because when you rip the reality for someone with that kind of power, then it scars them. When you exercise that kind of power in this reality, it rips a hole physically for a moment in this reality because you're bending the illusion. So you understand that the reality is like a bubble, and if a hole is open for too long, it loses something. Just like a boat, if there's a hole in the bottom of the boat for too long, the boat sinks. So of course there are things that are governed to make sure when rips are put into reality that they immediately patch up that hole. And that's when you start to become aware of the others. And these are, go ahead.
So is there a specific formula, or is these type of abilities governed by beings who actually are bestowers of it and allow you to have access?
Well, it's really more of it all happens without, as we talk about, life is like an occultation. There's a private initiation going on with everyone. The ones that are out in the open and the externals are the fake ones. So what happens is there was actually enough knowledge delivered within that last 5 minutes to actually point you towards the direction of where the next level of seeing is believing, meaning that when you see it, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And that connection is with the cassia tree. And then when you Google that and Google that enough, you'll figure out, or the acacia, you'll figure out exactly what that's related to. So that's, as far as, like, if I knew we had 1,000 more years, I wouldn't even tell you that. Because there's other methods that are easily able to take you there, but it takes time to do that. And that's what was really, what our reality was previously set up with, is the time that it takes to properly grow a spiritual being. Now, all hell has broke loose, and people that need to become spiritual need to become ultimately spiritual. And this is the interesting text, because you say, well, I thought we were spiritual anyway. The reality is that because we use most of the logic side of our brain, we become more like logical, maybe animalistic, some people even robotic, besides spirit, when you see spirits and how spirits behave. So the reality becomes is that the person has to get acclimated with being a spirit again. Like, you need training to be a spirit. Isn't that a shame? So what happens is that the way to do that is that plants serve as the bridges between our state of consciousness and the state of consciousness of absolute spirituality, and how to still be cohesive in absolute spirituality. And that's where chemistry comes in at, because if you can reduce a plant, i.e. a tree that is 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years old, because that tree, if you reduce it into a certain state and ingest it, generally it would be like in a powders type form, you would gain insight at that moment of everything that tree knew. 100%. I'm not giving you, I don't have time. I'm outside of time. I crossed over that point. So everything that I'm telling you is exactly how it works. What they do is they fill the reality with enough stuff to get the people not to believe this. Now, you see, this is still very exclusive. There's only about, I guess, at the most 40 people listening to this right now, and overall about 800 people listening to this. So this still means the information is relatively blanket when we have billions of people in the reality. But Solomon, as they're telling you in the mythology, went to Ethiopia. And then in Ethiopia, there grew a tree there, as we know in the garden. And then that tree was then brought to the temple. All they're saying, and then even they built the temple with the tree. They talk about the acacia. The acacia tends to follow every character in the Bible around the whole trip. But what is this tree really capable of doing? And why is it so precious? Well, Google will tell you that. So that's really where we're at, brother. I mean, I do appreciate.
The acacia and the cassia are the same thing?
Exactly. The acacia and the cassia are the same thing. And then when you unfold it, because remember, any knowledge that's really powerful can be unfolded, and it starts to cross into other things. Because the name is really where the power is. And if you look deeper, you'll find that cassia was actually the name of the queen of Ethiopia, and her daughter, who they're calling now Andromeda. So, and when we find like a whole story that's in the Greek mythology that is interpreted in the Greek way, which nobody understands now, but it actually talks about how that there was enmity between the daughters that were coming from that area and the Neptunites, or the ones that were from the sea, or the sea people, which they remark about a lot of as the ones showing up on land and killing and pillaging things. So what ends up happening is through a quarrel, they sent the Cetus monster. Now, the Cetus monster is the inverted pentagram. That's what it's known as in the sky. Cetus is an inverted pentagram. So it says they used basically the magic of the inverted pentagram on the people of the Queen of Cassia's tribe because of their not liking the way the women were more beautiful than theirs. So this is really giving you the deep, deep secret about where the enmity between different races is still continuing. But now it's over because the reality became when you have those two opposite poles, a child is born out of them. And that's what really the whole Jesus story is stemming around, is this child is supposed to be a mediator. Because what happens is, just like if you put two parents that still have some sense in the room and they start to have a quarrel and the child steps in between them, they'll actually cease the quarrel because they'll see within the child themselves mixed together. So the child, or i.e. us, number 3, is supposed to be here to mediate the battles that is going on between two, which is all actually taking place inside of us. Once we mediate those two energies, the red and the blue, you can't choose the red pill or the blue pill, you have to pop them both. Once you take those two energies, and that's happened in your mind, remember, in your core and being, and who you are, not the one, I'm just going to try this right now, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But in your mind, there has to be an agreement. There has to be clarity there that something has changed. And they know on the timeline if it's changed. And that's why it's important to get the knowledge of where you may feel uncomfortable. Like what you actually feel may be where you still can't get over it. Like, where does your hatred still lie? And then that's your question. Because once we can unseat that, and there's no more hatred, then you can be everything. And only when you can be everything can you tap into other minds. Because they're not you. They're still on the other side of wholeness. So this is the abilities, and this is how they're obtained the easiest way possible for the timeline that we're existing on now. So we have about 18 more minutes left in the show, brother. Did I answer all the questions that you had?
Yeah, brother. I mean, the questions that I had, I mean, there are other questions, but that's probably beyond another scope. I'll catch you over the time. But thanks, you did a great job for what I asked.
Well, no doubt. I mean, we got about 18 more minutes left in the show, so if you have one more question, then we can go ahead and lay it out right now. Then I can take the caller from the 434 area code.
All right, another question I have in terms of, the whole ascension thing. So, basically people ascended, and they have the ability to go through different dimensions, so they actually choose to be here out of love for others when they can just leave this plane?
Let's talk about that. That's very loose. Like the New Age movement's explanation of ascended is very loose. First of all, ascended just means you went higher from the state of consciousness that you were in previously. You became more subtle, more balanced, and your frequency raised. If you plug your ears, you can actually hear your frequency. You put some of those professional ear plugs in your ear, and you'll hear a ringing, and that's your frequency. When you actually ascend, you will hear that go higher. Like we've witnessed that on a couple of occasions, where you can actually hear the frequency in your ear go higher and higher as you're making the ascent. So what happens is that when you have these kind of individuals that know how to do this, first of all, you're still, even though you may be ascended, there's more still to do. There's no end to this. Like, people are not just looking for ascension and then it's all over with. So what happens with the individuals that are actually walking the dimension, that have these abilities, is that they're at work. They're actually doing things that equal, because society is a large mass, and everyone kind of works to shape it and to mold it to be perfect. So everyone basically that is into a higher state of consciousness still owes their other selves, which is still what everyone else is, the the ability to give them opportunity to rise up. Now, here's another important thing. When you say they can come out of the body and to go in other realms and to do what they do, this is only being everything. Remember, about half of the day you spend sleep. So if you spent sleep as everything, that means you could be anywhere. I've never seen any limitation to that world, to tell you the truth. I have not seen all of what the dream world has in store. So the reality becomes most people are just stuck on one part of it or another, and that's why it's important to read the levels of the dreamers in that new post, because it shows you how to get up that ladder. Because then when you're on level 5 dreamer, as we're calling it, you actually jump into these other realities and these other bodies, and as different states, you have almost full access to what it is that you want to be and do in there. Because in there, if you're on that level, you are not harming anything. Most people, because they still, like if you see something that looks different than you and then you react like it's different, then it starts to act different. That's how it works in these worlds. When you act like you're the same, then it basically just shows you what it is. It shows you more of you. So do you see how there's a higher level of conflictive character that goes on within our mind that has to be removed first before these other worlds that they're definitely there and there's no end to them can be jumped into in the period of time in the day in which you are asleep. Now, here's another thing about sleep. It's the same thing that you saw in the movie Inception. When you go into deeper levels of sleep, the time there expands. It could be a year there, and yet it's only 10 to 15 minutes have passed here. So a level 5 dreamer has the ability to go into worlds that don't work on the same timeline as this one, while they maybe appear asleep in this world. You see, so this is the expanse of what we're talking about. But the first part of that, remember, is Kundalini and being able to ground with the energy that the earth has, because all of that still needs to be powered. Like where you're right now still, because you're in a physical body, just like a tree outside, it's taking energy or power from somewhere. Some type of inexhaustible source, it appears like. That inexhaustible source is actually in the core of Maya, in the core of the organic being that we're actually standing on, resides an energy center. And you have the ability to actually connect with that through visualization. But now again, this starts to sound new age. So the reality becomes, if you need a little bit more abrupt way of showing to you that this is working, then you should go talk to the tree. Because then all of what I'm explaining to you right now, you know works because you actually saw it. So that sometimes becomes the only difference between a lot of what is being taught right now in some of these sectors that have done a lot of research, but the person that is learning it can't do anything because they've never, all they need to do is see it once to know that it's working. And then after that, they can work for it from there. That's kind of what the tree does. It shows you at one moment what everything really is, and you realize how naked you are, and how everything is watching you, and that nothing is private, and that you're definitely connected more than you thought you were connected. Maybe connected more than you want to even be connected. That even comes across the mind. But at least it breaks that shell, because actually what you hear physically is an actual popping and cracking of what I believe is the calcification around the pineal gland that operates as an egg. Now, an egg must deliver a certain level of resistance, or else what is inside the egg will never have an opportunity to be born. So this is also the way our matrix or our world is constructed. It has a certain level of resistance in order to produce what it has been producing now. And that is what the resistance is actually doing, is we're producing the knowledge now. It didn't happen before. If it happened before, then we would have all been on a high level then. That's what this is about. This is real time. So I'm giving people knowledge that I find out in real time, and I'm applying it, and it's working. It's not that I've already gone to Tibet and I've sat with the High Lama and I went all the way out of my body and then they sent me back. It's not that. Here's the path, I walked it myself, tried, tested, and approved. I've been already through most people's lifestyles and lifetimes just to show that it actually works. I can unlock again the mysteries about the misconceptions about religion and a lot of the different life forms that exist here, because it's important for people to have that correction before they can release themselves. But remember, any knowledge that is real knowledge that a person is denying, they're only denying their own freedom. So there is an actual war here with people that you're actually trying to let them go, but they're fighting you. You're trying to give them the knowledge, and they're like, man, that's wrong. You shouldn't even be telling, what is this? What's wrong with you? The world is almost over the way it looks right now. So if something some type of stimulus, as they call it, let's do another stimulus package. If a stimulus doesn't come in, then everyone can pretty much pack it up. But that's when you see that the spirituality really kicks in. Like, all I noticed in my life is the spirituality didn't really kick in at first until I was able to simulate my mind going into a disaster. Because every time a disaster starts happening, we get real spiritual. So I started noticing about myself, like especially if you go to jail or something, all of a sudden you're spiritual. And it's because there's a pressure there that can't be removed except by something invisible, because you can't even see the pressure. So it's almost like a trained instinct for us to know when we're dealing with invisible things to call invisible beings. But you can't see them. You see? So it's like...
Doesn't it seem like for instance, all the people with the means to bring about, why is it, I always look like in the Bible it says that the children of darkness are wiser than the children of light. It seems that people that hold the mysteries of creation are all the people who don't want to share it, because all the people with the real resources, right?
That's not correct. When you say, first of all, the people with the means to fix, they don't have the means to fix. Money is not going to fix this. That is actually
the power and influence they have, though.
It can't be done. Like, see, the thing is that the power and the influence that they have has made them who they are. So the power and the influence cannot make anyone else something different than what they've become. So even if they're hearing it, it's almost like watching a comedian and he's your favorite comedian. Then he decides to do a serious role. And then you're looking at him like, man, I just can't stop laughing about him doing the comedian role, because that's all I see. So do you understand where when a person does gain this level, but they didn't do it spiritually, of being able to influence people, even when they start talking about, they're not talking about this, but if they start talking about let's come together and do things, people are still kind of looking at him just like that lady said to Russell Simmons during the Occupy Wall Street, when he was up there talking, and the lady just got up and she said, Russell, I don't even know why you're talking. You're part of the problem. And she's right. So that's why they don't have any means to do anything, because the ones who have the means to really do it, they keep suppressing. Like the knowledge that is already delivered now, it's here about how to release people from the dimension and the state of mind, the dementia that they're actually in. But now, these people are still clueless to how to release that, because they can't. It's for us to do it. And that's why I was saying at the end of the email, the society is never invested in a person's enlightenment. That's not what the society is funding. We have to fund that. They're funding our demise. We have to fund our survival. And so, because that's how the poles are set. Because it's important that they stay that way too. That's why, because everything that will be gained because it was earned. Not because it just flipped and he's been living in the Bentley all his life and then all of a sudden he gets into the higher state of enlightenment. No. He will have to go through undoing all of that, however long that takes. The reality doesn't really care. That's why they keep creating them. They have so many. And so that's really the gist of it. The next wave of people, now if you notice very clearly that they are actually getting ready to have a new wave of people coming that are going to move out of the way these individuals that have been basically in the spotlight up until this point. They are about to, for better lack of words, retire. And then there is another group of individuals that have this higher state of consciousness, but remember, it's going to be set up still the same way, but amplified. So you're going to have these highly spiritual, supposedly, leaders leading people. But it's still, they're never telling people the truth about spirits and spirituality. Remember, they're just another level of the same stuff. Do you know how many levels of the same stuff there really is? And how it looks different to everyone when they're on the other level? But the reality becomes, just because we have very spiritual, enlightened leaders, doesn't mean we don't still have leaders. which is a concept in itself that has to be done with. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that it will morph into, when they bring the extraterrestrial, which they've already done, they're bringing the extraterrestrial component to expand people's minds more. And then thus, it will give birth to another reality that is very similar to this one, but you may not be able to recognize it. But the same thing is going on. External dependence upon salvation. Something outside a person mainly, or a physical being, is supposed to take me into the higher states of consciousness. As long as people are actually doing that with the wrong individuals, that's why I'm working to get in and get out, so I don't actually get confused as being one of these individuals. I only want to give out the knowledge that's going to get everyone to the level they need to be, and I'm gone. That's it. No up on the stage, vote for me, etc. Because it's not that, it doesn't take that long. It just takes comprehension. So if I have to keep saying the same thing over and over again in different ways to actually get people to understand, look, it's about when you're ready to dare. It's about when you're ready to get out of the norm and actually take a step, even though you feel like you're not going to make it. Like, it actually requires that kind of attitude where you don't necessarily go to be comfortable. You go because you no longer can be comfortable. And so that's what's up. So there's a big part of this, man, that I know that you're ready to receive, because I can tell by your questions. And the only thing is just a couple things need to be ironed out. And then once you get that, man, you'll experience everything that you keep hearing these folks proclaiming, but they're obviously not experiencing. And then you'll actually see right then why not to show it to people. Because that's why it's been taking me so long to even give people certain kinds of information, because once it's coming out of my mouth, even though I didn't make the mess, I'm the one here cleaning it up. But I guess if you're everything, then you did it too. So it depends on how you want to look at it. But the reality becomes, when I say certain things, even though it's the truth, people still look at me, as long as they're not in wholeness yet, as saying something that is not true. And then I get all of the brunt of the load behind that. So the more truth is a sword, so you actually just cut the person. And so when you do that, you got to heal them up really quick. And if you're somehow not available for both of those procedures, that's why they say there's a threefold nature. There's birth, sustainability, and death. You have to be able, destruction. You have to be able to do those three. You have to be able to birth something, sustain it, and then destroy it. You have to know what times to do that. Just like planting. Everything here is like gardening. You know how there's certain plants, once they get rotten, you just have to pull them up, and then you can shave them down and then make them into the mulch for new plants. But you have to understand how to do all of that. And this is what requires our every moment of just grabbing this thing from what we learn and saying, okay, I'm back on ship. I'm back on deck. Like we were just laughing about, if you just all of a sudden make a weird noise and then you shake your head and everyone's looking around you like, what is going on? And you'd be like, man, where am I at? I just got back. Like, and that's how it is sometimes with how deep we are in this shell of who we aren't. And then when we come out of that shell, people around us don't tend to recognize us right away. And then that's where, certain parts of the path begin. So, brother, I'm going to go ahead, 2 minutes and 33 seconds left in the call. I want to thank you for calling in to the Universal Current. I'm going to go ahead and take this caller from the 434 area code. Caller from the 434, you're on the line with the Universal Current. We got about 2 more minutes left. State your question, please.
Wholeness, yes. My question is concerning about calling out to external deities. If we are ourselves introverts and we are a portal, then let's just say if someone is caught up in like a voodoo cult or a currency and they are calling on to deities, is this coming from inside themselves?
Well, there's a difference between evocation, which means outside, and invocation, which means inside. And what I would encourage the person to do is to see how they actually identify with these spirits. If they identify with it something as external to them, then it does have the ability to become a demon or a divided being. And like I said, there is those that are inside of wholeness and then those that are outside. And so what ends up happening is that if the person has set that thing up inside of their mind as something external, other than them, that is supposed to come and do something for them, then it becomes very dangerous.
only because the rules of the universal law say that anything external to us that we are depending on for favors of the spiritual nature, we should automatically begin to question that relationship and whether or not it's in balance. So we need to ask anything external to us that is providing something for us, what is it getting, basically? So people say, okay, well, Seven, what are you getting? My whole existence is because of everyone that is on this line and on the resistance. And they're actually the reason why I keep studying, because I have to keep finding out so that I can bring it to them. So there is a relationship that is going on that is very positive. Now with the deities, because they're hyperdimensional and have existed across time and have like a track record, it becomes important to realize the communication. This is what I talked about, and you've got 20 seconds. Have to understand the communication with the Most High. Is the Most High to you like something that you have to call, or is it something that's always with you? Is it something that is external and only has to show up after it's being evoked, or is it always there? It's because, and to understand when you're identifying with the true one, is that it's always there.